Ghillie suits this week on Mail Call Mondays. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Well, today we're going to talk about ghillie suits. You guys have asked, we received a resounding response from last week's video. So we're going to talk about ghillie suits in general, and in particular my ghillie suit, which I have sitting right here. Now, ghillie suits are somewhat of a rite of passage for Marine Corps Scout snipers. Generally, in a Marine Corps Scout sniper platoon, you construct your ghillie suit prior to going to the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Basic course. Now, we get a lot of questions about ghillie suits in civilian life, but I don't really see a whole lot of places in the civilian world where a ghillie suit is really a good idea. I mean, they're cool because Marine Scout snipers wear them, but beyond that, their usefulness really decreases quickly when you get out into the real world. The thing about the ghillie suit is it doesn't make you invisible. The ghillie suit does not make you harder to see. What the ghillie suit does is it is that last incremental bit of concealment for a sniper when he's already done everything else he can possibly do to conceal his position. A Marine Corps sniper, if he goes out and stands in the middle of an open field, it doesn't matter if he's wearing a ghillie suit or not wearing a ghillie suit, he's going to get busted. The purpose of the ghillie suit is that after we have done everything to set up our firing position, everything we can possibly do utilizing terrain on a stalk, the ghillie suit gives us that last little bit of edge. In reality, a properly trained Marine sniper can complete a stalk in his underwear without actually wearing a ghillie suit and get a 10 on the stalk, if he utilizes all the other principles of concealment and of proper movement without the ghillie suit on. The ghillie suit basically is a band-aid to fix things when you screw up, or to give you the last little edge when you have a trained observer on the other end of an optic trying to find you. Now, enough babbling on about why you would or would not need a ghillie suit. Let's talk about the actual construction of the ghillie suit. There are a lot of ghillie suits out on the market. Some of them are just absolute trash that are Hollywood BS, and some of them are fairly good quality and fairly good ideas behind them. My ghillie suit here was constructed approximately 15 years ago, and it has held up all this time with very few fixes and very few modifications because I really overbuilt it when I started out. Ghillie suits are heavy, they're itchy, they're nasty, they stink. This one is actually, because I cleaned it up before I stored it away the last time, actually doesn't smell too bad. It has a nice earthy smell because all the vegetation that gets in it never gets out and it rots inside the ghillie suit. So that actually is a benefit because it helps mask your smell, that hot, sweaty smell, and it just exudes the rotting earth smell that you find out in any field or forest. Now, the primary important piece of a ghillie suit is the Ghillie Veil here. Now, this veil is constructed using a old Woodland BDU cap. Yes, I did actually wear Woodland BDUs when I was active duty. They hadn't come up with all the new digital patterns, but digital patterns will work just fine. As you can see, when the veil is properly worn, you really can't see what pattern the cover is. Now, the veil kind of looks like a dead animal here, doesn't it? Like a dead cat or something. The veil is worn in two different ways. When you're moving, when you're actually crawling into the stalk, it's generally worn with your face out this way and with the long portion of the veil draped down your back. This gives you the best visibility to the side. It doesn't get hung up on stuff and it's not falling in your face all the time. So it's cut rather short in the front. The bangs on the veil really don't drape down into my face. I don't want it to cause a whole lot of shadow when I go peeking up around things. You don't want to peek over things, but peeking around things, I don't want a big black shadow here because that will draw attention to you quickly. I do want this nice long bit down in the back, because when I get into a final firing position, I'll turn the veil around and this forward portion drapes over my rifle, and it helps conceal that shiny brass cartridge. It helps conceal any movement that I may have to do to make adjustments to my rifle scope, and it conceals the scope itself all the way down until you get towards the objective end. Now the veil itself is constructed just like the rest of the ghillie suit. The veil, I use a little bit lighter weight netting. This is actually the camouflage netting like you would use to cover a vehicle, but most of the actual plastic camouflage leaves or the garnish on it has been stripped off, and instead I've tied on this burlap jute. Now I used 3 different colors on this, mainly because we just all went together and we bought a bunch of different jute, and we got some in different colors, but the main jute is just natural tan jute, and that's really the best thing, because the different colors you're going to pick up from vegetation in the area. You don't want it to have colors that don't exist in nature. So there's very little green used in here, because if you're stalking in the fall or in the winter, then there's not going to be a whole lot of green out there. You're going to want mainly tan of dead foliage. The jute, back when we were building these, we would generally buy sheets of burlap or big rolls of burlap from the hardware store, and we would cut them into about 8x8 or 12x12 panels, and then we would strip the panels by hand. We went through a lot of beer sitting and stripping burlap into the jute fibers. Nowadays you can buy just raw jute fibers, so if you're wanting to construct a ghillie suit of your own, I suggest you do that, because stripping burlap is a really nasty, tedious job. Don't get the little narrow rolls of burlap if you decide to strip it yourself, because you will waste half of it. All the short fibers you throw away. You won't end up only using the long stuff. So don't buy the rolls that are narrow tape-like rolls. If you're going to buy rolls of burlap, get the really, really long rolls that you can get at the hardware store for gardening and stuff. So you're going to strip it down, and what you're just basically going to do is tie that jute onto the netting. There are a bunch of different ways to do it. What I'll just do is bend the jute in half. I'm sorry, I don't have any extra jute here to show you how to do this. But take your long bundle of fibers, just bend it in half, stick that loop through the netting, reach your fingers through the loop, grab it, and pull it back through and tighten that down so it just cinches down onto the netting. I found that works really well. It doesn't come loose, it doesn't pull off. When the jute gets caught on stuff as you're stalking, as it will, and you tug on it, it actually tightens that knot down instead of causing it to loosen up. Now once you've got jute tied on to your mesh here, your netting, you have to have some way to attach it on to the actual base garment that you're using. And what I did is I took 550 cord and stripped the guts out of it, and then I used fishing line to sew the 550 cord onto the hat. Now that I've done quite a bit of sewing tactical nylon, I know that this would have been just fine if I used a very heavy-duty bonded nylon thread, but fishing line was something that we had. It's all over the place, so we use fishing line and a heavy-duty needle to tie it on there, and it's still just fine. Fishing line will not rot, so you don't have to worry about it at all. Do not use cotton thread. Cotton thread will rot, it'll break away, it'll just be garbage. So you want something heavy-duty. Dental floss is also another thing that works very well, that holds up for a very long time. You want to get a really heavy gauge needle when you're doing that. So the length of gutted 550 cord onto your cover or onto your blouse or trousers, whatever you happen to be constructing at the time. And using the 550 cord instead of sewing the netting direct to it allows you to remove the garnish or the netting if you need to change it out later on, if you need to remove it, or more importantly, if the base garment gets damaged. If this cover started to rip out, because actually the netting and the jute is going to be a whole lot more durable than the ripstop nylon cover underneath. If that cover starts to rip out, then we can just undo that. It takes very little time to tie some 550 cord or sew some 550 cord onto a new cover, and you're back in it. Now luckily this one has worked for quite some time. Now one quick thing you'll notice when I hold this up is the brim of the cover is facing towards the long side of the mesh and jute here. The reason for that is that when I'm wearing it forward, again, I don't want that shadow over my face. If you're using a boonie cover, a lot of guys will cut off the whole brim of the boonie cover across the front, across the short end of the netting. I do want it sticking out towards the back though, because that helps keep this scratchy, nasty jute off my neck, and that will really get in there and it'll start rubbing and you'll get all kinds of nasty marks there. Plus, when you start weaving vegetation through here, you'll have stems and thorns and bugs crawling all through there, and it's nice to keep it just a little bit off your neck. So that will help there. Then when you turn the cover around backwards, when you turn your veil around backwards and you have the long section going out over your scope, this helps bridge that gap and helps keep it from bowing down in front of your eyes. So it bridges the gap between the eye relief that you need between your eyeball and the scope, and helps keep things from draping down there. So that is about it on the veil. Now, if you build nothing else, a veil is the way to go. You really don't need this big heavy blouse. You don't need the trousers. The veil is what we used for 99% of the time when we were going out and actually on patrol versus just doing a dedicated stalk. If you're doing a stalk and that's all you're doing, then we would go out with full trousers, blouse, and veil. But if you're just on patrol and you may just need to do a really short stalk to a target, the veil is the way to go, because your head and your shoulders are going to be the highest portion of your body when you're out there actually working. So let's toss the veil aside here, and the stuff is really nasty. Even after 15 years, it is still shedding jute. As soon as you get it out, it starts dropping it everywhere. So do this outdoors when you do the construction of your ghillie suit, or do it in a garage, somewhere where you can sweep stuff up. I mean, we have fibers floating through the air right now. It's just really ugly stuff to work with. Now we have the ghillie blouse here, and the back of it is constructed exactly the same way you do the veil. For this, we used a little bit heavier material. The netting that I used as a base for this is actually tennis court netting. We found a tennis court net somewhere that was no longer being used, or no longer serviceable, I guess you could say. And we requisitioned that in order to construct quite a few ghillie suits. So that worked out really well because it's a really heavy material. Now it is black, so we hosed it down with some Krylon spray paint, some tan spray paint before we started using it. Most of that spray paint has gone, but if the jute pulls apart, you really can't see the black. It's now more of a dirty black. It's not just a really hard black. So that's not a big deal. Now through here you can see I was kind of experimenting with some different stuff. We had some different materials that we were using, and I tied in very sparingly some different things to just break up the sea of regular jute. Now that's the key thing to a ghillie suit. A ghillie suit is intended to break up the man-shaped outline. So you don't want to have any patterns in here, or you don't want just one solid sea of things. So we did a little bit of different stuff in here. In the end, that really is just me goofing around, trying something different with my suit. It doesn't make a big difference in the end result, because the jute is just to help hold the garnish. Now garnish is the live vegetation that you pick up at the stalk site. The old saying is veg is the edge. The ghillie suit gives you a way to hold vegetation on your body versus just sticking it through your BDUs or sticking it through your load-bearing gear. But the ghillie suit really is not your concealment. The vegetation that you attach to it is your concealment. So you want a really robust way to attach that. And you don't want to go overboard on the jute. I mean, anywhere that I grab this jute and pull it aside, you can see the netting underneath it. So I was kind of scattered on how I tied the jute on there. The jute bundles here are really not incredibly long. You can see how long it is, and it is now dreaded up. When you first do a ghillie suit, it won't look like this. It will be fairly straight jute. This one has been used and mudded and then come back over and sprayed off in car washes. So the jute has started to dread up and take its own shape, which is a good thing, because there's really no big patches of jute out in nature. It's all these different textures and different patterns, and that's what you want it to get to. But you're going to weave your vegetation in and out of here, and that is one of the key skills of a Marine Corps Scout sniper is the ability to be able to set up his ghillie suit to match his environment. It's easy. If I took my ghillie suit and handed it to a pig and told him to go out into the field and conceal himself, he's going to get busted because there's going to be a big fat ghillie suit hanging out in the field. Teaching him how to weave the vegetation in here so that you don't have leaves turned upside down so that they're going the direction they're supposed to be, and to maintain it throughout the stalk. That is the skill that you earn through stalks over and over and over and over again. So that is the back of the ghillie suit. The tail on it is rather long. The reason that I constructed the tail of the ghillie suit as long as I did is because I want it to drape down beyond my waist. I want it to drape about halfway down to my knees. Again, that way we can use the ghillie suit, the ghillie top, without actually using your ghillie bottoms. You don't have to bring the ghillie bottoms along. And this drapes down. If you're running it over top of a pack, I can roll the sleeves in and I can strap the ghillie blouse on the outside of my ruck, and then I have the same ability over a ruck that I would just wearing a bare ghillie suit. So it makes it fairly versatile. Again, we just sewed 550 cord on to the undergarment with fishing line, and it's worked very well. We haven't had any problems tying it loose. When you choose an undergarment to construct your ghillie suit on, you want something that's going to be fairly robust, that's got a fairly durable material. You don't want to go with the lightweight ripstop camis. It's going to tear up. It's going to rip the netting off, because you will get this thing tangled in some nasty brush, and when you tear loose of that brush or you go to rip out your garnish later on, you're going to put a lot of stress on those tie points, and you can really tear it apart later on. This, as I mentioned in the last episode, is a MOP suit. It's an old chemical biological field protective suit. Used to have a charcoal liner on the inside, and that's what kept the chemical agents off of your body. I went through and cut all the charcoal liner out because it's some really nasty stuff, and was left with just basically a heavy-duty BDU blouse that already had a zipper on it and a heavy-duty set of BDU bottoms. The other advantage of the MOP suit at the time, regular BDU blouses and bottoms, the regular blouses didn't have the shoulder pockets. We weren't that cool yet, and these have shoulder pockets, so I could put a set of a monocular or range cards or data cards or anything I wanted to in the shoulder pockets and have them more easily accessible. You still have chest pockets on BDUs, but as you can see on the front here, there's no way to access chest pockets because I stripped all that off and we've glued on this nylon material here. This is actually salvaged from an old cot. We went to Supply and found some cots that were ripped up, and we cut the material out of them, and that material is actually glued onto the front of the blouse with just regular old shoe goo. It's rubber shoe repair adhesive, and we used a ton of that and glued it down the front. And the trick to that was you do dots. You don't do massive lines or patches, and if you do dots, then it remains flexible. If you do one big sheet of shoe goo, then it gets really hard and it's not flexible. That's one of those hard learned lessons. We had a lot of guys that tried to do a lot of shoe goo to stick it on, and it ended up just being really difficult to work with. This way it's still nice and flexible, and that nylon allows things to slide really easily. It allows me to pull myself across the ground where the majority of my weight is on my chest without getting snagged or getting caught up. And really, you didn't have a whole lot of problems with brush getting caught in this. I never had problems with thorns digging in or catching it. It just slid nice and smoothly. You want to make sure, as you see here, we've got Velcro patches here. You want to make sure that front seals up really well, because as you're sliding along, there are all kinds of things that you're sliding over, all kinds of brush to try to jam through. I don't think I would try to use just a regular button-up cami blouse. I want something that seals up that front a little bit better. Guys have successfully used cami blouses, the heavier weight, non-ripstop material, but that's just my preference. And again, there are as many ways to build ghillie suits as there are snipers out there. Each of us put our own little twists on these. One final thing that was really nice on the field protective suit is it has a high collar that zips up and protects my neck a little bit better. So any skin that you can cover up with your ghillie suit is going to be a whole lot better. There's a lot of things crawling around on the ground that really want to eat you. so any skin that you can cover up is good to go. The mop suit has Velcro closures on the sleeves that I can close it up pretty tight around my arms and not worry about it sliding back. One thing that you'll notice very quickly on here is there's a lot of sleeve that doesn't have any garnish on it. It stops basically just past my shoulders. All the rest from elbows down, or actually from about mid-bicep down, is bare. That's because that's what you're going to use to pull yourself across the ground with. If you put a lot of garnish and a lot of netting and jute down your arm, then it catches on everything. And when it catches and pulls, that flaps brush around it really will reveal your position quickly. So having smooth arms helps out a whole lot in that movement and not revealing your position. You don't need to try to put vegetation down on those arms, because it's going to get thrashed, it's going to get pulled loose, and it's not going to help you out in the end anyway. One final cool little addition that I did on my ghillie is on the inside here. I cut the whole back out and glued in some tent mesh. That way my back could actually breathe. You get extremely hot and sweaty in these, even in really cold environments. So having the ability for my suit to breathe well really helped me out. The mesh, I really want to mesh on it because you will get a lot of bugs, a lot of insects and things crawling around inside this jute, and I wanted to be able to keep that out of my back. So I glued that in as big a panel as I could without really destroying the structural integrity of the garment, and it's held up. I haven't had any of this tear loose, or haven't had to patch any of this in a while. And I just glued that in with shoe goo. Shoe goo is a really, really nice thing to use when constructing ghillie suits. Now for the final piece of the ghillie suit, I've got my ghillie trousers here, and I'll show you the back first. Now, as we mentioned, the ghillie suit blouse really drapes down quite a ways, so I don't need to bring the garnish, the jute, and the netting up too far on my butt. I can keep it down pretty low, and that keeps my butt clear, so that when I'm sitting, if I'm moving around in a firing position, it's not catching on things and again dragging, flapping brush around, revealing my position. The cargo pockets I left accessible, so I can throw things in the cargo pockets, and the garnish does not go down too far. It doesn't go past the hem. I don't have anything hanging off down there, so that way if I'm actually walking, or I have a chance to bear crawl, then I don't have the garnish getting caught down there. The netting that is going down the back of my legs is really narrow, and there is not a lot of jute on it. I don't want it hanging off the sides, because when I'm crawling and dragging myself along, sometimes you can use the sides of your legs or your knees to help pull you, and I don't want it getting caught up and creating more drag. So really, you go minimalist on the pants. We attach the netting to the trousers in the exact same manner with some 550 cord tied on there. Knee pads, I don't sew knee pads in the suit itself, because there are times you want them, there are times you don't. It makes the suit more difficult to store and to pack. I'd much rather actually put knee pads on my legs underneath the suit, and it gives them a little bit more smooth, a little bit less for vegetation to catch on. There were guys who actually sewed knee pads in the front of their suit. I can't comment to how well that worked, because I chose not to do it. I think that the suit is loose enough that if you just try to sew knee pads in there, they're probably not going to stay exactly where they need to be. Knee protection, depending upon how often you're stalking and how far you're stalking, may be something that you want to look into, because in school, stalk after stalk after stalk, you just wear your knees out. They're raw after a very short amount of time. So having those knee pads on really helps that out. Now when we look at the front of the trousers here, again, I started this fairly low, about mid-thigh, but then I have my heavy canvas protection going all the way down the front of the thighs. Now this is just regular canvas. It was actually a discarded shelter half. We cut up shelter halves to use this, or to do this, and again, just dots of shoe goo down the middle, and then a line of shoe goo all around the side glues it down to the front of the inner garment. It keeps things nice and loose. It's easy to move around, but it protects me a little bit more from thorns. The reason I use cotton canvas on this instead of the slick nylon like I used on my chest is I want to be able to grip with my legs. I want to be able to push them into the ground and inchworm forward. If I put a real slick material on the front of here, then it would be like trying to crawl on ice. So it's much better to have some grip on your legs. If you're really in a situation where you need to pull yourself forward without lifting your legs or without using your legs at all, it's very easy just to lift your legs slightly to take the pressure off of them and pull forward with your arms using your chest to bear the brunt of your weight, and that would allow me to slide smoothly and keep my legs with the least amount of pressure possible. But most of the time you're using your legs to help inchworm along, and so that little extra grip that you get from the cotton canvas has worked very well. Now the bottom of these, another reason I like the field protective suit is because we have these zipper closures down to the bottom, and these suits, the field protective suits, and I've gone and jammed the zipper up here. The field protective suits were actually designed to don over boots without taking your boots off, so it makes it a whole lot easier for me to put these on and off without unlacing my boots. I just figured that was a much better idea. Guys that used regular BDU bottoms ended up having to take their boots off very often when they put their ghillie suits on. And we also have a nice little tie string down here at the bottom, so I can cinch the bottom of the ghillie up and try to keep creepy crawly things from coming up my legs when I'm out on a stalk. That is about it for the trousers and the ghillie suit overall. Now guys have asked about using flight suits. Flight suits were frowned upon because, as we mentioned earlier, there are situations where you may just want to use a ghillie top. There are situations where you want the top and the bottoms. If you have a flight suit, you don't have that option. It's all one piece. The same can be said about a smock or anything that's got a hood. If you have a hood and you do a one-piece type ghillie suit or one-piece type ghillie top where the garnish and netting is uninterrupted from the head to the waist, then you don't have the option of just running a veil for a light stock. You don't have the option of turning that veil around and helping to conceal your rifle. So it really locks you into what you're going to do. Having a three-piece ghillie suit where you have a veil, a top, and a bottom gives you the most versatility to pick and choose which pieces you want, which pieces you need, and to leave the other stuff either packed up or leave it in the rear with the gear. So that is my suggestion on building a ghillie suit. If you got any questions or comments on it, you can leave it in the comments section below. Again, there is no right or wrong way to build a ghillie suit. There are just suggestions, and there are things that over the years we found that work better or work worse. I hope that gives you some ideas if you decide to construct a ghillie suit of your own. There really are not a whole lot of situations where I think a ghillie suit is the greatest thing in the world. Oh, one thing that I will address on the ghillie top that I forgot to address when I was talking about it. One of the reasons that we set the top up the way that we do, and one of the reasons we want to run a separate top from a veil, is that when you actually get into a final firing position, it's nice to be able to turn that ghillie suit top around. So instead of having that slick nylon that is all kind of one color facing your observer or facing your target, you can turn that around so that you have that garnish and that jute, and then all your natural vegetation that you've stuffed in it, that's facing the target as well. So that way you can switch that blouse around, wear it backwards, get the extra concealment, or turn it around and drape it over your tripod so that's in front of you. I've actually done that before on stalks where I've totally taken the ghillie blouse off, draped it over the tripod holding my rifle, and used it like a blind in front of me. That's a really nice thing to do on really hot stalks, because then you can air out, you can relax a little bit before you commence with the final part of your stalk. So again, tons of different ways to use them. When you use a ghillie suit day in, day out, you find things that annoy you about it and things that you want to change about it. They're really ugly, nasty things. They're not made for display. One of the reasons mine lives in a duffel bag in my garage instead of on a mannequin in my office, because it is really nasty. The Wookiee suits like you see on eBay or like you see in the movies where they're just a big puffy ball of yarn, that's all fantasy bull crap. Those would never survive a real stalk. They're just really asinine. So don't spend your money on any of those. What actually is a really good option, I've seen some of them out there, I don't have any links right now. I have seen tops that are just netting sewn onto the top. There's no jute, there's no garnish in it, it's just netting over, for instance, a BDU blouse. That is a really great idea because it allows you to get into the area you're going to be working. You can clip vegetation off there, you can thread that through, and again, veg is the edge. That vegetation gives you the extra advantage. You don't have to carry around all that extra weight of that jute if you don't need to, if it's just something where you need to veg up real quick to get in and observe something. Vegetation really is the key, knowing what vegetation works well, what vegetation doesn't, how to actually get that vegetation in the suit. And that only comes from experience. It comes from doing it over and over again. It comes from getting busted and learning why you got busted, having a skilled instructor explain to you, hey, this is what I saw, this is what you screwed up. So really, my skill just simply comes from the ability of my instructors when I went through sniper school to explain to me what I did wrong in great detail, and the pain of having to do it over and over and over again. That really cements that information into your mind. And even when I went through a police advanced sniper school years after I went through my original Marine Corps Scout Sniper basic course, I was able to throw on the ghillie suit, veg it up, and successfully stalk with no problems at all. So that's all we have for this show. If you like this video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot!